Hi, everyone, and welcome back for those of you who are for your second session to start off grade one, and welcome to those of you who are new to this process. My name is Chris Sarsky. I'm one of the consultants with the CART Consortia, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to work with you on getting the sort of the starting points for the new grade one curriculum up and running, and hopefully we can give you some ideas that might be helpful in your planning as you move forward. Um, for those of you who have not yet unpacked some of the three key documents that are needed for the session, we aren't going to go through those in the same way that we did at the beginning of the month or last week for those who joined us then, but I will touch on them just so that you can see them, so it'll make sense to you as we move forward. For those of you who are with me, please just bear with us for a few minutes. And then for those who are new to it, I will show you at the end the link to where you can find all of those documents so that you can download them. So we are on sort of our starting point for the year, and we're just getting rolling as best we can. And hopefully this will get everybody a chance to look at September and October and feel a little bit more comfortable about it. Before we move forward, I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement. I am coming to you from Treaty 6. I know that many of you are from all different areas of the province. In the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground and giving voice to the original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history may have forgotten. So what I'd like to do today is I'd like to just take that few minutes to touch on the three, what we call the three key documents, and I will unpack them in the order that really you should probably download them if you have not yet done so. And you can always stop the recording after each one and go get it, and then have a few minutes to look through it before we move forward. Just if you feel more comfortable with it, it'll give you a better sense of what it is that we're talking about. Then I'd like to just look a little bit at the concept, the term of concept, and make sure that everybody's clear on what that looks like, because those are our big ideas, our big rocks, and we want to make sure that we're all looking for the same and assessing the same when we're going through our documents. I'd like to provide you with the taking inventory, which also would be a little bit of work that would have been done in sort of the key documents if we were talking about those. So again, you can stop the video and I'll show you where. That you could just pause, take the time that would be needed to go through that, or working as a PLC with your colleagues, and then just carry on when you're ready, because I think those three pieces are very key to moving forward. So before we start with just the unpacking of key documents, let's talk with the most key documents, and that's the terminology that we're all working with the same understanding. So we no longer have strands in math, we have key organizing ideas, and those organizing ideas still name what we would call a strand before. The idea is named right after the words organizing idea in the curriculum documents. And I'll show you where those are again if you're not too clear on them. But more importantly, that organizing idea spans generally several grades, if not all of the grades. And our first organizing idea that we talk about in the curriculum is in fact one that covers K to 6, so all 7 grades. And it houses those big rocks, those essential learning outcomes that we talked about. There's where I'm going to find the big idea or the big concepts that are sitting. And we want to make sure that we're all working from that same understanding. Otherwise, we might be interpreting the learner outcome differently than maybe what its intent was. So we're always starting at the top, looking at that organizing idea, finding the big rock, the big ideas that we need to unpack, and how I unpack that big concept will depend on my organizing or my guiding question, my learner outcomes. So it's going to be very specific to those areas. The guiding question is really one that's more for the teacher. When you read that through and you think about the learner outcome that you have to cover, and you were going to answer that question, how would you answer it in light of where you need to go with the students? What kinds of activities might you consider? What will enhance the understanding so that you, in answering that question, have an opportunity to really provide, a broad spectrum for not only just teaching the content, but for students to take that knowledge then and apply it and transfer it on. Learner outcome is, in fact, what we've always said it was. A learner outcome is what directs us and tells us what the key pieces that the student must be able to master when they walk away from that particular area of the curriculum, and when we're assessing them at the end of the year, whether they've met their goals. That is very specific for each grade, and that's how I kind of narrow down that big concept that's at the top, how I unpack it for the smaller chunk that is going to be in my grade. The knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures, often called CUSPs by the first letters of each of those words, they follow along with the learner outcome. And what it is we will have an understanding, a general statement, which is supported by content, knowledge, and skills and procedures that are not intended to be done separately. They're intended to be married together in order to meet that overarching understanding, which all together helps to build the foundation of our learner outcome that we are going to be teaching. The literacy, numeracy, and competencies remain the same. They are still expected to be covered. They did not change from the 2013 ministerial order. There was a few edits made to the numeracy and literacy progressions, but there are still 8 competencies, and all 3 of them are still intended to be and should be considered and integrated into all of our units as we move through. So we're going to look at the very first sort of the key documents I was talking about. So for those who've seen this, maybe I can fill in some holes and maybe just hang tough with us for a few minutes. This is the document, the color of our document that you would see if you went into New Learn Alberta right now and went to the printable curriculum. This is the color of math, the sort of the brownish, dark brown, orangish color that we have. And you'll notice that the 3 different shades are always present when there is a new organizing idea that comes up. The organizing idea is always in the darkest, and it also houses which idea. So remember I said organizing idea, first word behind it tells you which one you're going to be dealing with. In this case, we're talking about number. And then the statement behind that will generally house one of the big ideas, the big concepts that is being spanned right across, in this case, all the way to grade 6. So if I were to look at this, I see quantity. Quantity is a concept. We'll visit that in a few minutes. And that is the big idea that's being housed here that's going across these grades. How I unpack quantity will be defined more further by the grade that I'm in. As I move down, I have my guiding question and I have my learner outcome specific for each grade. Now, what you might see, though, that is a little bit different is that we have actually in Zone 4, when we did conversations, we sometimes found it a bit challenging to talk about a learner outcome such as students interpret and explain quantity to 100. But when they had multiple rows of understanding, it was sometimes hard to know which one we were all focusing on. And so we went through and numbered them. And the numbering convention is as follows. The very first number just tells you the grade that you are in. The letter tells you which organizing idea we are focused on. In this case, we're talking about number. The number behind it says which outcome is this in the number section. So in the organizing idea of number, this is the very first outcome that is stated. Students interpret and explain quantity to 100. If there's a decimal behind it, it just simply means that this learner outcome has more than one row of knowledge, understanding, skills, and processes, CUSPs. So in this case, it has a 0.1, meaning that here's the learner outcome. This is the first row of knowledge, understanding, skills, and processes. If I go to the next page, I'll probably see 1.2, and it won't be the same understanding. It won't be the same knowledge, skills, and procedures, but it will still be the same learner outcome. The learner outcome does not change from page to page. Just the understanding, knowledge, skills, and procedures do. So here you see 1.2, students interpret and explain quantities to 100, but 1.2 talks about these 2 understandings and how we would unpack them. We have numbered the entire document all the way to grade 6 in the same way, so it doesn't matter if you teach a double graded, then that would be just change the number in the front, and that would be relative to whatever grade you are. The letter will change depending on the organizing idea. So if we were in geometry, it'd be a G. If it was time, would be T, and so on. And I'll show you where you'll find those letters. So here you see same learner outcome. Here's 1.3, here's 1.4. Some of them have up to 7 rows, 8 rows. So this is just an easier way for you to find it. And all I did was put another brown line in. Nothing's changed. Everything is identical to the document that the government gave us. The only thing is we just inserted it so it's easy for you to find. And if you're working as a PLC or if you're working virtually with your partner, then you can easily reference them. So I would download this. If you have not yet done so, you could just stop the video and do so. It doesn't have to be printed in color, but I would put it on 11 by 17. It gives you a chance then to put notes on it as you're going through it. A couple of clarifications too, as we started to unpack this, and there were some questions about, is everything, I have to do everything, or do I have a say in some things? So we received some clarification. This is one of the slides from Alberta Education. And just to help you to maybe navigate the waters of those documents, if you come across a statement that has the word include or including in it, it simply means that what follows that is required knowledge. So if they say that you're to use a traditional algorithm, or you're to use certain words, or you're to use certain strategies, then we must make sure that those are included in the teaching for the students. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that you're going to teach. You can definitely still use best practices. If you have something that worked well with students, you can still use those. You just make sure, though, that all of the things that are listed behind includes is in fact there. Such as has a little bit of flexibility built into it. So often you will give a statement, and then they might have a question or a statement like such as, and then they give you an example. And so you are free to use that example. You're free to look at the example and create your own based on that. You could use yours and theirs, or you could look at it and say, I don't know, that one's not going to resonate with my students, depending on what it is. Maybe you live in a different area and it's a cultural reference or whatever. It doesn't fit to what your students would resonate with your students. You're welcome to create your own. So you have the flexibility. And so even in the statements that you see here, right angles can be identified using various reference, such as corner of a piece of paper, angle between the hands on an analog clock at 3 o'clock, the capital L. Could be the corner on a book, could be the corner on a desk, depending on what kind of desk they have, right? These are just suggestions, and definitely you can use them, but you can definitely add on to those as well. And then lastly, if there are some words that are in parentheses, those are generally math terms that we do need to teach the children. But because of the terminology that's in the bracket, and it might be a little bit more difficult for them to master and maneuver, you may choose to go with some sort of lay language in math, a little bit easier for them to understand, more age appropriate. So in this case, we're teaching transformations, and we're looking at translations, rotations, and reflections. Those are really good examples that need to be taught. However, if I have a really, really young student, I might teach them what that means, but also teach it in conjunction with slides, turns, and flips, which so many students know that way, and it just resonates with them. So you have that flexibility as a teacher. Also, when we have things like the verbs that we would find in the skills and procedures, and I almost like to call those the concepts of skill, because this isn't just for us, the teacher, it's for the student as well. But what context those words are in will also determine how they are interpreted. So you have to really be careful that you don't just pigeonhole one word into meaning only one thing, because the context might dictate something else. And so you have 3 examples that are given here. I'll just do the first one. Children interpret composition of quantities within 10. So I might identify different quantities. I might compose, decompose. I might recognize, supersize, right? These are all the pieces of interpreting quantities to 10. Whereas when I put it in terms of students interpret shape in 2 and 3D dimensions, 2 and 3, that means I might identify, I might make a model, I might model what's already there, I might sort things out based on attributes and characteristics. So again, that's a different way of interpreting. So we have to make sure that we're careful of the context in which they are placed. So as I was saying, up in our organizing idea, for example, I gave you quantity, that is a concept. The word quantity is pretty open, like it's pretty abstract right now. You don't know if you want the quantity of 10, 100, how you want me to break that down. Like until I get specific information, it is very broad. And that's generally a way a concept is. It's broad until we start to knock it down, and then it becomes more of a topic as opposed to a broad concept. So in this case, if I talked about quantity 100 years ago, it existed. 100 years from now, it's going to exist in whatever forms they are, but the quantity, the notion of quantity, will still be there. And it doesn't matter where I go in the world. I may not speak their language, but there's a word for quantity. So I'll be able to go there and I'll be able to say, you know, whatever it is in their language, and quantity would mean something to them. So these are kind of the 4 points that we use. It's timeless, it's universal, go anywhere in the world. It's not North American or Albertan or anything like that. Abstract until I can narrow it down. Usually that's a learner outcome that will help us do that. And I can transfer it, right? I can take quantities to a variety of different scenarios and apply my learnings to that and make it work there. So remember to look in the organizing idea. That's where you're going to find those big concepts, those big rocks that we are always looking for. The second document is called the Curriculum Comparison Document. And just by the nature of its title, it is just that. It looks at our old 2007 curriculum that we're familiar with to moving to the new curriculum. And you'll notice that in this one, it is color coded. And I'm just going to turn my video off in case I block anything here so that you'll still hear me, but you just won't see it. So when you're looking down the left-hand column, what you see there are the outcomes that we are familiar with from the 2007 curriculum. The next 3 columns are from the new curriculum. And they're not in the same 3-column orders. In fact, what we did, we had teams of teachers working together, and we had them work through the understandings first in each of the different ideas. We found that the understandings were sometimes worded very similar to our existing or old learner outcomes. And so the groups used those to match first. And then if we needed a bit more clarification over here, then we looked at the knowledge, we looked at what the specific learner outcomes was worded as, we looked at the knowledge, skills, and procedures to verify that we in fact had matched the correct thing. If you see something that is yellow highlighted, it's not that we didn't go to 100, we're going to just a different way this time, but anything that's highlighted in yellow is new. It's new to your grade. It could be completely new. It could be just a piece of it as being new. So that if you do see that, you're going to see that's in a context of either the learner outcome or it's a statement that was made in the skills and procedures, whatever. In this case, you can see that we had all of these outcomes that matched this one understanding that's in here with these knowledge, skills, and procedures. And although the wording here isn't identical to the wording here, the intent of what happened here is in fact still the intent of this new curriculum or this new outcome. And so we didn't necessarily highlight it was yellow because the wording wasn't identical. If the intents are the same, then really we just left it and we recognize that it's going to take us to the same place. So the procedural pieces are not all that different from what we're used to. And quite frankly, in kindergarten and grade 1, the changes are less significant than what we see when we move into grade 2 and 3. So it's still foundational knowledge is foundational knowledge, and we can move forward with that. So when you're seeing the wording here and you say, oh, well, it's not exactly the same wording. No, but if the intent is the same, then we just left it the way it was. If you see lots of yellow, it means that this is new. Now, new doesn't mean new to the math program. It could be that it came from another grade. It could have come from grade 2 to grade 1 or grade 1 to kindergarten, if that was the case, or it was not there before. Like this is just something we've never done before. So you see more yellow highlighted pieces. And so that's your flag to pay attention to. This is new to my curriculum. And how does that fit when I start unpacking it, when I'm looking at the different kinds of activities that I'm going to be having the students be involved in. And you can see that we have 3 groups of understandings fitting quite a number of outcomes, not necessarily all in the same strand from the old curriculum. Now, again, this document is located on the website. I'll show you the link for that, but I would maybe stop the video if you're wishing to. download this document. And if you're going to download it, may I suggest that you do it in color, because if you notice, there was color coding over top of the learner outcomes. So let's just go back to the top here. And you'll see that anything in the new curriculum that was related to number has that pinkish red color to it. So it used to be called number strand. Now it's just number or N. The pattern is a light blue, P. Measurement M is sort of a magenta or red, purplish color, whatever you want to call it. Time is green. Geometry is a purple, light mauve. And then statistics is an off-white. So every one of these is color coded, and every time you see a color change, then you know you've moved into a new organizing idea as well. The color also becomes significant in the next document. So the comparison document introduces the color and the short forms to you, but then you will see also that it plays a role in the last document. And that last document would be our year at a glance. So we did, again, work with teachers once we had compared our materials. We knew kind of where we were going to go. We then set out to look at, with the new curriculum, we thought about where do you normally start in grade 1? What are the things that you're looking for when they're coming out of kindergarten? So traditionally, really, I mean, looking at what you would normally have done anyway. We looked at the outcomes and said, which one of the outcomes would we naturally start with? And there's, as in primary, you're always doing multiple things and you're revisiting over and over because you're working on mastery. And so you see that we have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.5. These are the ones that were suggested to be started with in number. That's not the only ones, but this is what we suggested in number. But if you follow them through, notice that September, October are almost identical. And only in November, we added in 1.4, but everything else still remains. What is different is these numbers you see highlighted in 20. And so once we had these done, one of the questions that we discussed was, well, obviously we're not going to do 100 in September. So what is our goal to see for mastery? Like, where do we want to get them to? What do we want to make sure they know how to do well? And so the teachers, and it did vary in some of our school boards that we work with, but for the majority of them, they said, you know, we'd be working to 20. Like, we'd be looking at working to 20 probably for the first 2 months to get them settled, make sure that 10 is going well from their basic counting and they have good understanding, and moving them towards 20. Now, this is only a suggestion. If 10 is where you need to be for these 2 months, that's where you need to be. These are just suggestions, and all of the groups that we work with know that these are movable. And in fact, we've even already suggested that maybe 50 isn't where you're going to be in November. Maybe it would be something like 20 to 50. Maybe the first month it's 10 to 20, that there's a range in there. So these are absolutely not written in stone. They're suggestions. If you're a person who likes to do things by themes and you would never do this, then don't. That's not prescribed. This is just what we are using in Zone 4, and a number of other boards are using it as well. But you're welcome to do whatever you see that works best for you. If you want to start at the reverse and work your way forward, that's fine too. We're simply using these right now to help with any cohort groups that we're working with, like yourselves right now, as we work our way through the curriculum. We're using this to help map out the PDs so that everybody at least knows when we're coming in, what we're going to be talking about, like what month are we on and what are we going to be sort of focused on. That doesn't mean everybody's there. It doesn't mean that some people aren't even further than that, and that's fine too. Remember, nothing's written in stone. You also see that there's references to money in here, and we have really made an intentional conversation to leverage money as not only a learning tool or a learning concept for financial literacy, because the children need to know the money and they don't know money. So financial literacy coming in is a great thing. But we also want to leverage the money, leverage it as a tool in math, because we used to use that as one of our biggest manipulatives. And it was such a strong foundation for place value and for understanding number. We kind of lost that. I think once the penny was gone, people said, oh, well, you know, we kind of fell by the wayside, and then we replaced it, not with bad things. We use a lot of base 10 blocks, and we use lots of Unifix cubes and things like that. And I would never say don't use those, because I would use them as well. But right now, I would say if we could pause some of those in lieu of understanding money. So let me learn the money as a child first. And if I don't use it, if I don't understand it yet, let me use it as a manipulative, make it a counter. So just if I have to count something to you to 10 and I don't know the names of something, you could even say, find 10 of the same thing. Just checking to see if you know what 10 is. I don't care if you know the money. Learn the money as they go. So we're kind of intentionally trying to really put money in front of them up until about Christmas. And then when they come back, starting to introduce other things. It doesn't mean that money is 100% everywhere, because it's not going to fit in everything. But I think you'd be quite surprised to find out how much you could leverage it for. And that just enhances the financial literacy conversations that we can have then. Also notice that September, October, November have other colors. Here's the last one that is in number, and it says addition and subtraction within 20 is just introduced. Maybe it's just a 5, maybe it's just a 10. Maybe you've got some high flyers that are ready for 20. But again, this is just a guide, right? It's nothing that's written in stone, because we have the whole year to start unpacking some of these. The pattern debate continued in every group we worked with. Some groups said patterns, they start day 1. Others said, I don't start patterns till about October, November, or usually November. In kindergarten, it started in November. In grade 1, most of the teachers we worked with said, no, we would do it right up front. And again, you're revisiting all the time. So if you introduce it, it's not a full coverage. It's not a one and done, did patterns in September, done. You're always bringing it back. You're always creating more opportunities for them. And then the last one was time. In this case, we're talking about duration, cycles. So when we're talking about time, most of the teachers said we would do that when we do calendar time, when we do our counting time in the morning, carpet time, that's where this would happen. And so you're actually going to see this show up in every month. It's just ongoing. And you would just continue to integrate the different pieces in appropriate times as they go through. This format is one that we saw with Edmonton Public when they so graciously shared out all of their module work when we were everybody forced to go online. And this is one that I didn't find that needed a lot of explanation. Everybody seemed to slide into this and understand it quite well, just the way it was laid out by the months. And so we used the same format. We obviously gutted the inside to make it work with the new curriculum, but the format comes directly from there. So if it looks familiar to you, that's why. And it's great. We love it. So then you see already we're into December. So we're not worried about that right now. That's down the road. So these are some, and you'll see some of those outcomes are continuing, just revisiting, and you're always just boosting up for mastery. And that way you can assess according along the way. Okay, so that's your year at a glance. Every one of them has been done every month like that all the way to June. Again, it's a suggestion, it's not a written in stone. But again, I would probably photocopy that one in color, then I would do it on 8.5 by 11. It doesn't have to be on large size paper. Okay, so for all of us, regardless if you were in earlier on the month and didn't have time to do this, or you're new right now, not only do we have those 2 months, and we try to focus on 2 months at a time, so we're just doing small chunks. You're not planning for the whole year right now. You're only planning to bridge and revisit and bridge and revisit. So as we're bridging our way to 100, for example, it would be helpful in September, October, if you wanted to look at November, December as well. But what do I already have? What are the tools that are going to really enhance these that I already use in the classroom that are just really the same things? And I just need to maybe grab a few more things, or I need to look at these numbers and see how I might add some more into my lesson. So what resources do you currently have that will help them to be exposed to number and, let's say, patterns? What do you need more of? That might be something to have a conversation with as a group in PLC. And what can you share out with somebody else? Like, what do you have that other people don't? Can you just share it out instead of reinventing the wheel? We have this information. Money is one that I will unpack in just a few minutes, but that's one that I really, if you have that in the school and you now look at these outcomes, how could you leverage money to be one of your tools, as well as the concept that you want to teach? Not only because it's financial literacy down the road, but because we could leverage it for the math side of it. So what you have here is, because these statements that you're seeing in your year at a glance Here's your learner outcome. Here are the understandings. The bullets underneath are the understandings. That's all that they are. So in order for me to unpack those two understandings that sit together in 1.2, I do still need to look at this kind of a part of the document. In this case, I'm looking at 1.5. I need to make sure that I see what are the knowledge, what are the understandings. Oops, that needs to be changed. Skills and procedures. And we just left some places if you wanted to print them for notes that you could just say, you know, how I'm going to unpack that. Again, keep in mind, maybe now considering if you had money, what would you use it for? How would you use that in this particular case? Okay, so as we're unpacking all the different pieces, you have a section for notes, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of just take an inventory between you and your grade partner or whoever you're planning with. Here are your patterns, here are your time, and remember, you are not completing everything in September. This is ongoing, so it goes on for a long time. We're not having to necessarily deal with cycles of all of the calendar pieces, right? As you already know, we need to learn the months of the year, the weeks, and so on. The other thing that you will find in your numbers outcome document is the financial literacy. And in this case, I'm showing you the kindergarten one first. And the reason I'm showing you that is, remember that in grade 1 this year, they didn't land at your door knowing the money. If in the perfect world they had come through kindergarten, they would have already been able to identify the coins and bills, the attributes, color, number, images, size, of value. Like they would know those pieces. So right now for this year, our bridging year, in order for us to really have good financial literacy conversations, even piggy banks, I need to understand the money. I may have to do a little bit of backup work and do some of that coin orientation in grade 1 and in grade 2 and in grade 3 and all the way up to grade 6 for those people who are doing the new curriculum. Children don't know money, so we can't just assume because they're a year older that they would know that. So we need to spend some time teaching them the concept of money, but also using it as a manipulative. Just keep in mind, I can still do a ton of outcomes with you, even if I don't know the names of the coins or the values of the coins. I can treat it as 10 of something, 5 of the same thing, 5 of the largest one, whatever, however you want to phrase it, they can still use it as a counter. When we get into grade 1, we're going to have conversations about coins, bills, debits, cards, credit cards. But then they really do need to know their money, right? It's that one step up because we're actually going to use that for skip counting later in your procedures. So I need to know the values of the coins. I need to know some of the images that would be coming from kindergarten. So most of them will know that, but that's okay. We still need to be able to do that. And then we're going to talk about money, that it can be, how it can be used. But again, I need to understand money before I can start talking about sharing. We'll talk a little bit about the sharing pieces too in subsequent sessions. How do we create equity in the classroom, especially for children who don't know money because they don't see money? That's a very different thing. So we need to be cognizant of that as well. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to address a little bit about money for those of you who hadn't really thought of maybe tying financial literacy together. I did go through the curriculum documents and very quickly kind of merged together. I didn't necessarily cut and paste every word that was there, but I went through the kindergarten document and highlighted anything that I could use money to teach the outcome. Sorry, got a frog in my throat. So anything that I could teach using money and still meet my outcomes. That's not to say that's the only thing I would teach all year to meet those outcomes, but up front, if I have to learn it, well, then why don't I knock off a few of my outcomes at the same time while I'm learning to do money in the same way? So anything that's highlighted in yellow, money could be used to enhance, teach, master, in some cases, that particular outcome. The transferability could be in using a different manipulative. Do they understand what you taught them with the money in that particular area? And now maybe after Christmas, I bring out something else and I want to see if they make some connections there. Here's where we see it in grade 1, quite a few more. So there's quite a bit in which I can leverage money right off the bat in order to help me to meet a number of my outcomes. In fact, skip counting is so much easier with money right now than it is just by looking at a chart that goes by 100. Not saying don't use the 100 chart, we absolutely will. But maybe first I start with money. So I learn it and count with it. So one of the activities that we have been using is just going in and giving students a bag or a half a pail or quarter of a pail or whatever you have of mixed play money with, I actually put bills and coins, and I even throw some geometric shapes in there. I just want to see what they do with them. And then we just ask them to dump it on the floor and just clean it up so it's easier to see. And that's the instruction. Dump it and clean it up so it's easier to see. And they'll dump things and they'll be all over. So the whole goal is for them to see if they can clean it up. Now, you might be saying, I'm seeing pennies on here, and the answer is that's correct. You are seeing pennies. So although we have no pennies in our pocket, our economy still very much uses the penny every day. You cannot go and get your Tim Hortons or your second cup of coffee in the morning and not have something that always ends in a 5 or 0. We still calculate with the pennies. Everything is still calculated to a penny, and your gas is to the nearest 1/10 of a cent. So because it's not in our pocket doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so when we now are going back into money, which is a good thing, there's nothing wrong with that. We did suggest that we order money. And when we order the money, we also say, bring on pennies. Pennies are great. They're great for place value. And I think we kind of lost a few bits of understanding in place value when we said, oh, the penny's not there anymore, so let's switch to something else. Base 10 blocks are great, and I would never get rid of them, ever. But if I don't even understand why 10 of those little white squares or yellow squares makes what you call a rod, and 10 of those rods, yes, I can show you, I can stick them up, I can match them, I can line them up, that gives me a flat. Who cares? Like, what do I know about a unit, a rod, and a flat, other than that it's 1 and 10 and 100, but I don't have a context for them. If I started with money and I changed that so that it is actually got value, so I have 100 pennies to make 1 loonie. I have 5 loonies to make a $5 bill, or however you want to do it, whatever. But what I'm saying is that the context is starting to be built in that the converting that you're teaching me with base 10 blocks has actual meaning. And quite frankly, you can go to the store right now and find lots of signs like this, 21.98, 19.97, 9.98, like whatever. They're all with numbers of ending in pennies. We just learn to pay to the nearest 5 and 0, and that's different. Children adapt to these very, very quickly when you tell them they're not in our pocket, but we still calculate. We even just gave them catalogs and said, find prices of things that are on sale, and they all found numbers that did not end in 0 or in 5s for sure. So this is a reality check that we could probably start to use these again and really leverage a better understanding of place value. When they do their cleanup, it might look like this. And if you listen carefully to what I said, just clean it up so it's easier to see. I said that purposefully. I didn't say sort. I didn't say put all the loonies together. I didn't say put everything that looks the same together. I just said clean it up, because I want to walk around as the teacher and find out what students know something in my class. Who knows money? If we're going to have a conversation about money with them at some point, who knows anything about money? And you might be surprised that some of them know a lot, and then some of them have never seen it before. So it's important for us to be really diligent in just walking around and saying, can you tell me about why these guys are all together? Oh, because they're all the same color. Okay. Is there any other reason you put them together? Well, they all have a duck. Okay. Well, is that a duck? And then some kids will say, no, it's a loonie. And some kids will say nothing because they don't know. Some will say, we've had a pelican, we've had a stork, we've had a robin, we've had everything. So clearly they don't know, right? But those are the things that we can unpack. That's the kindergarten part too, that they're missing, right? The attributes of the coin. Don't assume that they know anything about money. Assume they know nothing and be surprised when they know lots. That's kind of the nicest way to go. If I don't know anything and all I want you to do is prove to me, or you to prove to me that you can count to 5, I could say find 5 of something that looks the same. So now all I'm doing is actually seeing if they can even compare visually what is the same. Can they count to 5, and can they get 5 of those things and show me what they are? They will learn these as they go along. They will learn the values of them, but they don't need to be told. We don't need to hold this up and say, hey, did you know this is a toonie and it's worth $2? I don't know anything about money, knowing it's a toonie is a name, knowing it's $2 means nothing. So we unpack it slowly. So this is where I say leverage it as a manipulative for counting. And then as I start to learn, and I learn that the beaver's 5, I may not understand cents yet, but I may understand that it's 5 cents. I'll figure out what cents is as we start unpacking, but I can use that to skip count by 5. So 5, 10, 15, right? This is the magic of the money. Skip counting by 2s. What comes after 1? Skip counting by 10s. Puts in groups of 2s, right? There's so many things that we can do with money that will help enhance all of those outcomes you have. The word coin is something you may have to spend some time on with students because it's not something that they're comfortable with, and a lot of students have never heard the word before. So again, you might want to just ask, what do you hold up a coin and say, what is this? I held up a $20 bill and a toonie, one in each hand, and I would say, this is a $20 bill. That was my words. Then I just showed them the other one. I said, what is this? And they said, a toonie. And then I said, is there any other thing we can call this? $2. Correct. Is there anything else that we can call this? And some children said a coin, but very few. Like a lot of kids even said, huh? They've never heard it. So that's a word we may have to work on for them. So the story of our money is important, and they love the money. There's nothing holding them back with that. So I did create a slide here that says, did you know that they don't make me anymore? But most of the children have all seen, it was amazing to see how many of them knew what a penny was. If you need pennies in your classroom, send a note home and ask your parents. You might be surprised to know how many of them are sitting at home and they can't turn them in anymore. They may just send them to school for them to use as counters. If you would like a slide like this for all of the different coins as well as more, I would just subscribe to this. This is a teacher pay teacher, and I don't usually look at that. However, she did a fantastic job of creating things like this, and it saves you so much time, yet it fits the attributes that we're looking for the coins. Once I start to learn the coins, I can also be subitizing as I go along, right? I want them to be able to see this is 4. I want them to see that this is 3. I could slide these under, maybe not use all fingers. I gave you subitizing cards in your file folder that you can use that are varied in look. Put them under here, and then just ask them to put that many coins in whatever your fingers are showing. And if they're just starting to count again, then let them do that. But if they're beyond counting and they should be able to subitize them, then again, we can vary it up. Put a rec and rec picture underneath, put a hashtag underneath, whatever you find that you think would be appropriate. So again, instead of just using block things that we would put into 10 frame or a 5 frame, just make these counters. Just say, I need 6 of the same thing. If I don't know them, if I do know them, I could say, can you find me 6 nickels? Can you put them in? Okay, and then we could even skip count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I would skip count every time I put things like that down because it just enhances and makes them start thinking in terms of when I see a beaver, it's a 5, I can start working. You might lose them on the second one, but that's okay. They'll come along with you as you go. So instead of this, right off the bat, let's just use money. I could drag coins to every appropriate number. And again, I would say, can you drag a coin to the number that you're seeing on the screen? I wouldn't say 1, 5, 4. I want them to be able to know that, bump them up as soon as they're ready to go to 14, 10, whatever. Or just say, can you show me 3 pennies, 5 nickels? And I just want you to go up here and show me 3 of these when you drag them out. Then I know you know that this is a penny and that you can count to 3 or 13 or whatever number you're on. I could do a compose, decompose. So if we just want to do some basic addition, I could put maybe 3 pennies over here and 4 in here and ask what would the total be, right? And then again, you can change these. I mean, beyond pennies all the time where we can go beyond that. But the point being, I can use a part whole concept with money, just like I could have with any other block, including Cuisenaire rods. Just getting them to know money, but still doing my math that I need to be done. I could change it to subtraction by lining up 6 pennies up here and putting 2 here, asking what goes in here. And they can line up the 2 and see that I'm missing 4, and that must be what goes in here. So it's that part whole idea that we want to really work on. And we work on that all the way up to numbers that get larger to 100. So this template is also in your file folder. Here's a sample of some of the cards that come from the subitizing cards that we put in there. Every child should get their own set. Then they can just practice turning it over and calling it out, or I can play war with you, or we turn one over and whoever calls out the number first gets the card. Just anything that just enhances their mental math. In this case, also gives them the strength that they need for recognition and recall quickly. There is a bingo card game that you can use if they're just learning the money, play bingo with them. So there's 25 unique cards and a caller's card. It's also in your file. Or go fish. I get 3 cards dealt to me, cut these up, and then I ask, Mary, do you have a toonie? And if she says, yes, I do, she has to give it to me. I put down my pair. If she doesn't, I have to draw a card. So it's whoever gets the most pairs as they finish the game. Want to learn my words for each of my coins, nickels, dimes, quarters. What do they start with? Just give me a handful of coins at random. Put the leading letters around the room somewhere, and I have to go deposit the correct coin that leads with that letter. So do I know how to read nickel, penny, dime, those types of things? Show me the money may or may not be one that you can do right off the bat. And we're getting, as we get closer maybe to the end of October, as they start getting to more numbers, if I have 20 in here, then it would be reasonable for me to say, can you show me 20 over here? Can you show me 20 over here? All different ways of making money. If you don't have enough of the coins, you could just say, show me one that has money, show me 3 other ways to make 20. So whatever number you're working on would be appropriate. If I want to start with converting, I could show them that 5 pennies is equal to a nickel and that 2 nickels is equal to a dime. This is a very basic starting point, but you're not going to do anything like this, maybe not even until November, until I'm really versed in the money. And some of them will learn the money very quickly and will have fun with this. They will understand it. Others, they're not going to be ready. So again, I want to be able to subitize this. This is 5. I should see that. I shouldn't have to count it. I shouldn't have to see it in a 5 frame. I should see 5. But I could count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I want to make sure that they get that piece, but I also want them to see that it could be a nickel. Then I can start saying that I saw 5 of these in here. Now we're going to skip count by 5s. If I see these, I see 2 rows of 5s. Some students will say 5 plus 5 is 10. Some will go 5, 10. They're skip counting by 5s. Some will see this as a 10 frame and see it as 10. It's whatever they see, but they also should see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Like they should be skip counting. And again, if you lose them at 6, that's all right. Keep going. But we can use the money arrays in the same way that we could with anything else. So here I see 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So again, I see 2 10s. I see a 5. I can go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And when I get down there, I'm going to have 1 left over. And when that happens, now I can have the conversation about odd even, right? So this is the model for an odd even. And there's your 100. So this just gives you a sense of just very basically, this is just done with pennies, but I mean, we could do that with dimes, whatever you want to go to. But keeping in mind, we're only working to 100 to start with. And so we don't have to go crazy to get to 100 by September. But wherever I can visually show them and give them opportunities to see 2 groups of 5, or I should see a 10, or I see 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and then just let them count that way, whatever enhances their learning. This is also a program that I put into your folder. You can change this number up here. There are instructions on the side, you will see them. But these are iterative. In other words, they can pull these out. So once they start getting a little bit better, and remember that they're only counting to 100 cents or $100, right? We're not doing dollars and cents for grade 1. So they can show you whatever number you want 4 different ways. I try early on to start talking about efficiency. Can they remember to be efficient? In other words, can one of the squares have the least number of coins to get to whatever the number is I'm giving? But you have to have numbers large enough where they have that opportunity to have varied. Last year, I was working in a grade 3 class with a fantastic teacher, and she had, we weren't piloting the new curriculum, but we did do a lot of the new work, especially with money. And we wanted to see how quickly that might impact math facts, because we wanted to get them to 100 beyond if we could, but our target wasn't anything beyond 100. And she wanted a kit that, as the year went on, she said it would have been better if we had a kit for every child that they could just keep in their desk rather than us always getting everything out. And so we started to make a list as of February, the things that might be helpful in that. And what we picked were things that you could get at a Dollarama, Dollar Tree, probably in your room already, not that you had to buy everything, could just print them out. But they had to fit into a small container that fit in a desk, not took up the whole desk or fit into their cubby hole. Here's what we recommended for putting inside a bag of coins, given what they have to skip count by. So this is what we are suggesting would go into a bag, a Ziploc bag, something like this with the money in it. So this is what it would look like. Here's the subitizing cards. I would get a set for each one of the kids and just let them go at it whenever they have a few minutes. They can just work on it or just play with their parents at home even. But here's what it would look like in the plastic container. And again, these are not required. They're just there if you want to. You may even just want parts of them and not want to build a kit, but you want like some of the ideas. On the website, again, you'll find an area called kits, math kits, and it describes, there's a video there to tell you everything in detail, what's in grade 1. And then below it, if you wanted to print just parts of it out, that's up to you. There's no requirement for this, just for those who want it. We also included number lines, and these are kind of glazed over already. So they were nice because we could use dry erase markers. They have 10 on one side, 20 on it. They come from Didax, and we actually just built them into a pouch at the top of their kit. So everybody had their own. You also are talking about patterning, because that was something that the grade 1 said we would do that right off the bat. And because you're also talking about cycles and patterning, we were looking for some suggestions of things that you might start to look for. And one of the authors, Leah Dorian, is a great Indigenous writer. She does a fantastic job of stories and math, but she also uses very patterned and colorful pictures. So any of her resources might be something to consider. Because circle is one of your shapes as well, so is halves, not 1/2, halves, the word half. So I could start to even bring in the circle. I could bring in the notion that I have a half a circle. I see different colors, there's attributes of it. And then what are the meanings of the medicine wheel? In this case, there's different cultures, but why do they have different colors? You could pick one of them and just talk about cycles. I can deal with the different seasons in here. You see that winter is up here at white. So this fits very well, not only into your math, but into an Indigenous conversation to bring everyone into the mix. Here we see Blackfoot and Cree teepees. Typically Cree teepees, this depends on the elder and the nation that you are around, will not have patterns on them. Some elders will allow patterns on them. So again, it's what's in your area. But definitely Blackfoot have great patterns. And if you can find some, or you have some close to you, or you can get pictures like this, we can use that for patterning as well. You're talking about cycles. So as you start to teach about the calendar and you start teaching about the different months of the year, for the Indigenous, there are 13 moons, as opposed to our 12 moons or our 12 months that we have. So again, if you're unfamiliar with that, then I've given you a link down here more just for a little bit of extra reading on your own. But it's an interesting way to bring both calendars in and have that conversation. And why do we call it Turtle Island? So that's discussed in here too. But if you'll notice that every turtle, it doesn't matter how big they are or small, has 13 different markings on their shells. And hence there are 13 moons in the Indigenous culture. Not all 13 moons mean the same in each of the cultures, but they do recognize that there are 13. So again, it's the area you live in, but the stories are amazing. And the beliefs that go along with these for Turtle Island that link into the cycles for each area are also truly, absolutely amazing stories and really important for, I think, students to hear. So if you are looking for the website, it's the Moving Forward website, and you will find the key documents there along with the videos. The kits will be under the tab called Additional Resources. There's a whole bunch of things under Additional Resources. But again, you'll find a math tab, a French immersion tab, the science tab. So there's lots of places to go there. But again, if you're going to follow along and kind of do the 2 months at a time, then I really suggest grabbing some of those key documents so that you have a sense at least of what we'll be talking about from session to session. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope that gets you going for September and October. It gives you a chance to look at it. And then we will see you again in session 2, which will focus a little bit more on November, December. And I will probably unpack a little bit more on the concepts and assessment at that session as well. Thanks again, everyone.